Hey guys, welcome back to my road to seven figures, where I pretty much ramble every day about the things that are on my mind as I'm taking my business from 6 to 7 figures. So today I want to talk to you about procrastination, a topic that you've heard probably a million times before. And when it comes to procrastination, a lot of people say like, yeah, we procrastinate whenever we're working on something, important. Maybe there's fear of failure, maybe there's fear of success. You've heard all, the traditional explanations. So we do different things. We waste time on social media, we browse the internet, we look at emails, we go on YouTube, we waste time there, and so on and so on and so on. Now, for me, I think definitely guilty, of having many times when I procrastinated, and I still do. And it's been interesting, I noticed about myself. It's not that I just go on social media or check emails or things like that. Like those are some of the things that I used to do more. Now I do less of them. But even as I did that, I would find other things to kind of like do where I would be able to lose myself. So maybe I'd go shopping for a while, or I'd just go to a spa, or I'd go and visit my parents or visit my friends. And all of that, sounds like regular things that you would do. But I noticed that I was, actually doing some of those things to avoid working. So I was like, I'll just stop working a bit earlier and avoid that task, that's important, and so on and so on and so on. And I will do all of these different things. And I'm sure that if you think about it, you will probably notice that you do certain specific things that, when you procrastinate, to kind of like lose yourself and get your mind off of things. Maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's playing video games, maybe it's social media, maybe it's something completely different where, you're just escape whatever you should be working on. It's like going shopping for a few hours, like going out for dinner, like going out for coffee, doing anything, that you can to kind of like escape your thoughts that you're thinking right now. Now, that all sounds good, and we've all heard it before, but then I also realized, as I was going through this procrastination periods, I realized that there has to be something more. Because it's like, why do I procrastinate one thing and another person doesn't? Like, why would I procrastinate sending out an email to an influential person when another person can just send emails, easily? Why would I procrastinate, let's say writing a blog post when other people, write tens of blog posts every week? Like, why does this happen to me but not to other people? Why do I not do certain things and other people can? Like, what's the real reason? What's the deep reason behind it? And it took me a while to really find that reason and, understand what the psychology of, procrastination really is like, and also, how to start and begin solving it. So it wasn't until I read this book, which is probably a book that you've never heard of. It's a book that actually comes from an acting school that used to teach people how to act. And part of that is really understanding the psychology of people and how they think and how the brain operates, like how we think on a day-to-day basis, and why do we do certain things or why don't we do certain things, even though, for example, we say we're going to do them, and so on and so on and so on. So lots of things basically focused on why we think the way we do and how to change it, which is also the title of the book. So this is a book, it's from Thomas Garvey. I think it's also a relatively new book. So what happened, they had this acting school, they were teaching these concepts, and then it was just for actors. But then, people were learning that kind of stuff, and they're like, wow, this is so amazing. Like, why don't you create something like this for regular people as well, who are not actors? So that's why they wrote that kind of book, and they really elaborate on like all different ways in which the brain works and why we really do the things that we do on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, and how to change all these things. And one of those things is, for example, procrastination. Another might be self-sabotage. Whatever we do on a daily basis is usually, like a result of thinking patterns that we have. These thinking patterns might be visible, thoughts that we see in our mind, things that we say to ourselves, or it might be these invisible thoughts. So, you might have heard things like invisible scripts, limiting beliefs, invisible barriers, any of those expressions. That's usually referring to the things that we think subconsciously, but usually don't notice, that prevent us from taking certain actions or, pursuing our goals, or doing the things that we, genuinely want to do, but then just don't end up doing. So, whenever you had a friend that, always gets, like, you have a female friend that always gets like these bad boyfriends, and she's like, oh, why does this always happen to me? Or if you have a friend, that's always complaining about his work and how much it sucks and never does anything about it, that's usually a result of those, invisible patterns and, thinking patterns and behaviors that we just don't notice. So what I love about this book is that it actually goes and it takes you behind the scenes, step by step, of every part of your thinking. And, why do you think this? Why does this happen? What are the exact things, really honest things that we say to ourselves, that we think to ourselves? And how does that, impact us showing up in the world? Like, how does that impact our actions on a daily basis, our choices, our behaviors? Do we, lose ourselves in social media or even in food? Do we start binge eating? Do we pursue our goals, or do we do anything that we can? Do we find any excuse possible not to pursue them? All of those things, is what the book talks about, which is what I found really interesting. So going back to procrastination specifically, I realized that, the real reason why we procrastinate and why we procrastinate on different things is because, and this might sound a little bit cliche, but it does make a lot of sense, because of the things that happened to us in the past. And usually it's the things from childhood, like things from childhood, that happened to us, like the behaviors, like how our parents behave towards us, or like the things that people said to us over time. Those things really do, shape a big part of how we think, which actions to take, and so on and so on. That's why you might notice that, you might have a lot of different patterns, thinking patterns, behavior patterns, like your parents, even though you said like, oh, I'll never be like my parents. And then, maybe when you start growing up, when you're like 20, 30, you start noticing these things like, oh, I'm exactly the same as my parents in, many ways. So their behaviors kind of like shape our thinking, and so on and so on and so on. So I've noticed for me, it's like when I know like, personally, I had this past of like not being accepted. In primary school, I was always the weird person. In high school, I was also always the weird person, the different person. I would never fit in. I would always sit by myself, on the bench. Nobody would want to talk to me. I had very few friends. I always got into arguments with teachers because I never agreed with them. And, basically everybody was saying to me like, hey, pretty much you're no good, you're different, you're stupid, over and over and over again. And, that got me into an idea that like people just don't care about me, and that's why for a long time I was also depressed, and, I had a very rough period of my life before I actually started on my business. Now, I realized that, those things, very not consciously, but subconsciously affect how, I show up in my life and in my business. Because then later on, whenever I would, publish a blog post and I wouldn't get as many like likes on Facebook or as much traffic as I wanted to, I would always think like people don't care about me. And then the next time I was supposed to do it, I would procrastinate it, because it's like, well, why should I create this if people don't care about me? Now, again, it doesn't mean I haven't created any blog posts, because, like, you're on this website, I've written a lot of stuff. But I also feel like, right now and maybe that's, subject for another video, it's like I always feel like I'm reaching like 20% of my, 100% of potential. And I think, a big reason for that is just all these things. Now, why I love this book and why I really recommend you to read it, it's, first of all, because I think it's always a big advantage for you to read books that most other entrepreneurs are not reading, because it's your hidden advantage over them. And then I really recommend, reading this book, because so many things that you saw experts talk about, you'll see like all of these things like invisible scripts, things like that. People talk about things like that, but they don't really explain why they happen, how they work, on a really deep psychological level. And this book has just opened my eyes in terms of that, and understanding and noticing things, like noticing more of my own thoughts, noticing more of my own behaviors, and then learning and knowing how to actually change those thoughts, change those behaviors, has been invaluable for me. And then you'll also notice these things in other people, like when you see their thought patterns and behavior patterns, and you'll be able to, kind of like help them change these thinking patterns and behavior patterns better. So it's especially important for you if you're like, a coach or a consultant, probably especially a coach. Like if you want to help people and you want to, change their behaviors, change their thinking process to some extent, or help them change it, then this book is going to be invaluable for you. Now, one last thing, and I do recommend you to get this book, and I make no money by recommending you this book, by the way. I think this book, it's a really hard book to read. It's not an easy book that you just read in one sitting. It's not like this super engaging story. There's lots of different examples, lots of different terms. It's not an easy book to read. And I think most people that open this book don't actually finish it, because it's a very hard book to read, and even harder book to implement. So when one of my mentors recommended this book to me, he actually told me like, hey, Primoz, we'll actually go through this book together, and we'll just go through it like one chapter at a time and then talk about it every single week. So this approach has been working incredibly well for me with this specific book, because I know, if I just went through this book, I'd probably stop reading after a few chapters, because it is difficult to implement. It is difficult to understand. It is difficult to see. And it also takes practice to actually start, using the insights from the book in your life. But for today, the biggest thing I want you to take away is get a copy of this book. It will change your life. Not an overstatement. And whether you're, already running a six-figure business, or if you're, still starting out with your business, this book is going to be incredibly helpful for you, because you will be able to understand your psychology just so much better. Okay, that's the main thing I wanted to share with you today. And if you get the book, definitely let me know either in the comments or, shoot me an email and tell me how you like it. And I will see you back tomorrow. And also, if you have a second or two, if you have any questions for me, about my, road to seven figures, because I know we're touching like on a lot of things that might not be directly related to online business, at least like we're not talking about conversion rates and things like that, because I feel like, those things a lot of people are already talking about, right? And I will write content, I will write blog posts about those things and create programs and, share emails and share ideas on those topics of like conversion rates and everything. But I really want to address like all the things that are going through my head right now as a six-figure entrepreneur trying to get to seven figures. So that's why we'll talk about different topics. We'll talk about things like procrastination, because I'm not going to pretend like I'm not procrastinating, because I know I am. And all the top experts that you follow online have times when they procrastinate. So I want to address these kind of topics and, other interesting topics, anything that I noticed that's, out of the ordinary, anything that I noticed that's, different than what other people are saying or teaching. I want to use this series to kind of like share all of those ideas here and share them with you. So if you have any questions for me about my, journey or road to seven figures, let me know in the comments below, and I might just record one of the videos around that in the future. Okay, that's it for today, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care, guys. Speak soon.